You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 53. Today I'll be talking to Mike Sutfin. Alright, so my name's Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist Mike Sutfin. Mike is actually the first person that one of my guests suggested that I have on the show. When I asked Vanessa Foley way back in episode 1 who she'd most like to see me have on the show, she said Mike. Like Vanessa, Mike is a member of the international art collective The Vacuum, which I talked to Mitch about a couple episodes ago. But prior to joining The Vacuum, Mike's done work on several commercial illustration projects for games like World of Warcraft, Magic the Gathering, Dungeons & Dragons, and even Star Wars. We talk about these sci-fi fantasy illustration projects on the show, as well as how he first got into making vinyl toys, what he's been working on lately, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Mike Sutfin. Mike, welcome to the show, buddy. It's good to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So you were actually the first artist that one of my guests suggested that I have on. Vanessa, way back in episode 1, named you as the person that she'd most like to see me have on the show. So this has definitely been, a long time coming. So I appreciate it.
You know what? I actually heard that and my head exploded when she said, I was like, how the hell was I on her mind at that point? But I really appreciate that. She's an incredible artist and super powerful force in art. She's amazing.
Yeah, shout out to Vanessa. She's awesome. I hope she's doing well. So when I first met you, you were living in Oakland at the time, but I don't think that's where you grew up. I think you grew up somewhere in the Midwest, like Illinois. Is that?
Yeah, that would be kind of like my slaying the dragon years in Illinois. But my dad kind of had a job which kind of forced the family to pick up and move quite frequently. So I've lived in all over the place. But yeah, Illinois and Ann Arbor, Michigan were the two main areas that I kind of came up.
What was it that your dad was doing that had you guys moving around so much?
Construction. He was a cost engineer for a larger construction company. So one job would finish and then we'd kind of pick up and move to the next place, right as you got your first girlfriend to be like, hey, sorry, we got to leave.
So yeah, was that hard? Just the constant change, just going from place to place, not really having a chance
Hell
to
yeah. Yeah. It was pretty brutal. There'd be times where I would make friends for under a year, and we'd have to pick up and move. But I don't know, there were positive aspects to it too, kind of forced you to be more comfortable making new friends and acquaintances promptly. But it would also suck when, you got comfortable and then had to leave. But
for sure,
I don't blame them or anything like that. So it's all good.
Did you have much exposure to the arts growing up as a kid? Is it something you had around you?
My mom was always an artist. She did a lot of watercolors and things like that. But I got into comic books and things like that at a very early age. It was kind of one of the only things that I excelled at as a kid, got praise for. So obviously I continued on that path, and I just loved it. So I was always looking out for stuff.
So you got into comic books as a reader, but how did you make the jump, or what motivated you, I guess, to make the jump to actually drawing stuff yourself?
I think it was just like the appeal of doing it. I did do some sequential stuff when I was a kid, but obviously today it's more like a single image type scenario. But I just really liked having all the papers and pens and pencils in front of me, and kind of like how everything looked when I would lay it out and make the stories. And obviously I was super in love with a lot of the comic book characters that I would buy the actual issues of. Dave's Comics in Ann Arbor, Michigan was where I would get all my comics, and it was on the second floor of a building next to a pinball arcade called Pinball Pete's. And
Nice.
Those were like, take the bus downtown and skateboard and skate the diag and go get comics and play video games. It was just like, that was my youth basically.
So you said it was something that you were somewhat spurred by the praise that you got for it. Was it something your parents were supportive of? Were they like encouraging you to embrace your artistic side?
Yes, for sure. Like I said, my mom was an artist. Her mom, my grandma, was also like a really great artist. Like when I look at her stuff, I see a lot of myself in. Like she was very kind of detailed and stuff. My mom's more loose and expressionistic, which is something I kind of wish I had more of. But yeah, they were always very supportive. When it came to like actually saying, okay, throw down the gauntlet, I'm going to go to art school and things like that, it was like a little bit more questionable. Like, can this really happen? But yeah, they were supportive. I can't really complain or anything like that. Even today, after like had some success and like money started coming in to some degree early on, then they were definitely like very excited to hear about new upcoming projects and stuff like that. So
sure,
yeah, they're great.
And so you mentioned skateboarding, and you've done work for skateboard companies. How involved were you in the skateboard community growing up as a kid or adolescent, I guess?
Pretty involved. I mean, that was my whole life at that point. It was just skateboarding. That's like all I wanted to do. I was never extremely great at it. I was always kind of like mid-range, and I would get hurt a lot. I broke my ankle skating the banks, the famous China banks in San Francisco. I broke my elbow skating a half pipe. I got a concussion, all kinds of injuries and stuff like that. And every time I try to get back into skateboarding, I always get hurt again. So I just I always fall the same way. And I think I bruise my rib over and over again. So anyway, people probably don't care about that. But yeah, skateboarding was a big part of my life. The graphics and the lifestyle and just the rebellious nature of it all was just very appealing to me as a kid.
So it's not something that you still do today just because of injuries and stuff?
I don't. Yeah. Every time, man, I try to get back into it. Like I'll go to the skate park super early when no kids are there and, try it out. Transition stuff I can kind of get away with to a degree. I had to take a picture for a Thrasher spotlight thing on me. And in order to be in the article, you have to actually get a picture doing a trick.
Okay.
So I had to get back on the board, and I was able to do it, but it was just I don't know. my brother who's 6 years younger than me is an exceptional skateboarder. He's really good. He just has the talent, and he's able to do it later into life with no problems. He's never broke a bone. So
that's amazing. Well, that's amazing if he's been doing it as
knock on wood.
That's crazy. I mean, I see guys kind of adults, our age or whatever, still doing skateboarding. It's my bones hurt looking at them doing some of that stuff, I mean, Andrew Schultz, for instance, if you follow him, his Instagram stories are pretty much just always him at the skate park. He's just such a great skateboarder.
Oh, that's cool. I always wonder, I haven't really been that involved in Instagram lately, but I always wonder how how much of like regular life I could put on there. I guess some people would find it interesting, and others are like, just post drawings.
I mean, honestly, it's whatever you're most comfortable with. I see people do it both ways and are successful with either of those. So where did you end up going to school? Did you go to art school?
Yeah, I went to Northern Illinois University, which was basically the closest school to my high school.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in a band at the time, and I was very into it, and I wanted to keep it together. So that's basically the reason I went to NIU, is to kind of stay close to my friends and keep this band thing going. But I mean, I'm still friends with those guys or whatever, but that particular band crumbled, and but I just lucked out because I met Mark Nelson, who was my professor at NIU, who fantasy sci-fi fans will know his name. He was one of the earliest people to work on like Dungeons and Dragons, like in the infancy stages, and
nice.
Like back when it was like done out of a garage. Like he was he was one of the first people. He's an incredibly talented, powerful person. Like he's like super prolific and very influential on a lot of people. But I met him, and he kind of like opened a lot of doors for me, just as far as like what was possible. I never really thought I would go down like a science fiction fantasy path. Like it never like totally appealed to me, but he kind of like exposed me to some artists that I related to and I thought was actually really, really cool. And I was like, oh, maybe I could do this. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome to have somebody so influential to you in your, formative years as you're starting to kind of figure out what your own art is. So like looking back, like how do you feel about your time in art school? Do you feel it sounds like you feel like it was a good experience. Do you feel like it helped you in the ways that you needed at your point of development as an artist?
All because of that one guy.
Okay.
He was just incredible. My junior year and senior year, he became like my best friend, basically. Nice. Which maybe was a little strange, just because like everyone's like partying and stuff like that, and I'm like meeting Mr. Nelson for dinner and just talking about art and stuff like that. But he's an incredible person. But yeah, I kind of look at my years in college as just being completely lucky that I met him, and like I met people like all my friends back then, like Mark McCoy and the people I played in bands with and stuff like that. So it was just awesome.
Yeah, because I guess if I have the timing right, it must have been like right in the middle of your college years that you started playing for Charles Bronson. I think that kicked off in like 94, which would have put you around 20. Mm-hmm. So tell me about that. Like, how did you get involved with the guys in Charles Bronson? Because that's kind of a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah, it turned into a big deal. Like at the time, it was just like for fun, kind of like I met Mark McCoy in this horrible math class that everyone had to take to just kind of like get through college. It was like called Math 101. It was like the most horrible thing you could imagine. It was like all word problems. I think I had to take it twice. But anyways, and I got a tutor too to get through it because I'm like terrible at math. But yeah, I met Mark in that class. I think my friend Jane actually introduced us. She was like, you guys both skate and listen to fast, crazy music. You probably like each other. So we used to actually skate in the basement of this math building because it snows in the winter at Northern Illinois University. So we would meet and like just do flat ground tricks in the basement of this math building when we probably should have been studying. But so I met him there. I was in this other band at the time called Dr. Lunch. And so we would kind of see each other at basement shows and stuff like that. And we also had some art classes together too later. And we just became friends. And Mark asked me to join Charles Bronson later. And I was already a fan. Like, they had been around for a short time. They just had like a demo out, and I saw them play a couple shows, and it was just like they were terrible, but it was just like super fun, and everything about them was like engaging. Mark is kind of like a brilliant dude, and the rest of the band were very cool guys too. So yeah, it was awesome.
So how long had you been playing guitar at that point? You said you were in some other bands before that. Was it something you did back in like high school?
Yeah, so in high school, I was in like a very technical death metal band. Like,
wait, what is a technical death metal band?
Like we were very like focused on, you know, playing off time and like as many notes possible, and like lots of stops and starts and weird time signatures and stuff. Like,
nice.
Like bands that we were inspired by were like bands like Atheist and Cynic and Death, just like the bands that just like really noodled a lot, quite a bit. So I became quickly proficient at my guitar, being forced to play like all these very technical riffs and stuff like that. So when Charles Bronson came along, it was just like a breeze, kind of like it was just like power chords, just played very quickly. At the time, when I try to play those songs now, like the Charles Bronson songs, they're actually like pretty difficult to play, just in terms of like speed and like the strength you need in your arm to keep up with all. The songs are very short, but you know.
And it ultimately obviously became a pretty big deal, because I remember talking to somebody either at Mondo or at one of the Vacuum shows who had found you as an artist and then realized that you were a guitarist for this band that they were in love with. So clearly like the word had gotten around. So tell me about that. Like how did y'all get such a big following?
Geez, like I said, like it was strange because at the time, like we would play shows and there'd be like 10 people there. I mean, towards the end, like it would get a little bit more crazy, and we were always thankful because we constantly had people like asking us to do records and things like that. But the whole like the fact that we're talking about it right now is it kind of blows my mind. And I really appreciate it. It became like one of these things that I'll always look back on as being, you know, one of the chapters in my life that means a lot, you know? So, like when I moved to California, I think it was like 2002 or 3. All the kids I would meet at shows and things like that would like come up to me and kind of say like, your band was important to me, and like kind of like change the path of stuff. And I was just like, what? Like this is a different state. Like, you know about this band? And then it just kind of like kept steamrolling, and people still know about it to a degree. Probably pisses a lot of people off, but I think Kerrang like put us on some list as like one of the most important bands from Illinois, which, hey, I'll take it.
Incredible. Yeah, man, that's awesome. You should feel proud about that. That's amazing. So, I mean, with all of this going on, how are you still able to make time for like your artwork and school? You know, I mean, while you were making music, how did you manage that time so that you could still make time for your artwork?
Well, I always kind of felt guilty about doing the band thing at the time, to tell you the truth, because at the time it felt like indulgent, like I'm here to be learning about art and studying art. I shouldn't be like traveling to go play some crappy basement in Madison, Wisconsin or something, you know, like, but, and I did, truth be told, I did leave the band at one point just because they got a new guitarist, Jeff Jellin, who was absolutely incredible. And I kind of felt like, oh, they'll be all right now if they want to continue. And so I did kind of at one point cut the cord and just focus on art at that point. But yeah, I mean, I had jobs during the summer and things like that, but, you know, I wasn't working or anything like that. So it was actually like a really good time for creativity. You know, didn't have a kid, didn't have a wife, you know, I could just focus on playing hardcore and just drawing at night, you know, like it was a good time.
Right on. And so, you know, in addition to Charles Bronson, you've also played in other bands since then. I think The Killers was another one that turned up on my Discogs search of you, and not the alternative rock band The Killers from Las Vegas. It's a different The Killers. So tell me about that. Like what was that band about, and how did you end up playing with them?
It was actually pronounced The Kylers.
Is that true? Okay, I was just reading it off of text, so I just assumed.
Yeah, I joined the band kind of like after they had been together too. It comes from like a Mike Judge Beavis and Butthead joke or what. I never really liked the name or anything like that, but it was just kind of like a fun thing to do. So I joined that band. I played drums in that band.
Okay. And one of the things that you did for them was do a lot of their album artwork, which with Charles Bronson, a lot of it was just photographs of actually Charles Bronson. So we didn't do, I didn't see a lot in the way of artwork that you made for that band, but for the Killers, you did do several of their album artwork, or several of the artwork for their albums. Was that something that the band members had asked you to do? How did you get into the business of making album artwork?
Just real quick, I did do 2 things for Charles Bronson. There,
okay.
On the first 7-inch, there's like a drawing of Mark that I did with Charles Bronson. Like he's singing into a microphone next to Charles Bronson's head. It's pretty terrible. But looking back, it's funny though. And then I did like a cover for the Quill Split, which Mark asked me to kind of use a piece that I had done for school. And then I think they replaced the cover later with like a picture of Twiggy or something like that. But the killer stuff, I think I just kind of did it, and everyone just had to live with it. And those were funny too, because back then I used to use a lot of photo reference. Like if you look at all the old Magic cards that I did and some other role-playing stuff, like this game called Shadow, all that old stuff, I would like go to the art school and like set up lights and like take pictures of my friends and then use them as reference. But as time moved on and I left school, I didn't really have access to like friends that I could just like grab, that I lived with and stuff like that, and like bribe them with pizza to come pose for me. So I would like take pictures of myself. So the 2 Killers record covers that are like very similar to my face, I actually like used as photo reference.
It does look strikingly like you, yes. Yeah. How did the other band members take that? Were you putting your face on the album?
Nobody said anything. I don't know. Maybe behind the
right.
scenes they were like, why is Mike's stupid face on all these record covers? I just figured no one would know except like, people around. But
yeah. That's funny. So, it seems like date-wise or time-wise, right after college is when you really started doing some of the sci-fi commercial illustration work that you did for several years with, and you mentioned it just now, the fantasy card games. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that the connection with your professor, so that might explain how you ended up getting into it. But how did that happen, and how did you start working for some of these card companies? Okay,
so yeah, Mark kind of like opened the door, put his foot through the door for me in some of these areas, just in terms of like kind of whetting my desire to do that kind of thing. And then once I did a few assignments at school and like showed interest in it, I think he felt confident to take me up to Lake Geneva, which is where TSR was based, which is Dungeons and Dragons headquarters. And I met, some of the staff artists there at the time. At the time, this was like one of the only places in the United States where you could like get a job painting. So it was like, oh my God, if that could ever happen, that would be amazing. Never actually happened. But I met people like, I met Brahm, I met Jeff Easley, who is like one of the greatest Dungeons and Dragons paintings ever. Like his style influenced so many people. So yeah, I went there. I saw like the staff room and all the stuff that was going on there. I got introduced to some of the art directors, walked through the building, and just it was pretty amazing. So I think the first job that I got was like for Dragon Magazine, which is like the Dungeons and Dragons monthly magazine that came out. I think I just did like some interior work for them. And I was like, oh god, this is so cool. So it just kind of steamrolled after that. You know, people would see my art in the magazines, and then I think the next stuff that I started getting was from this company called FASA in Chicago. They did a lot of role-playing games like Shadowrun and Earth Dawn, some other stuff like that. But they were kind of smaller. And then I think the big thing that I got eventually was Magic the Gathering, which was like the crown jewel of all that stuff at the point. You know, it just seemed so huge.
And were these all freelance jobs, or were you on their staff at some point?
I've never been on staff anywhere, except at a video game company later. But yeah, all that stuff was just, you know, work for hire, freelance contracts.
And so, you know, having made several card illustrations at this point, like what did that process usually look like? Did they typically have a pretty concrete idea of what they wanted ahead of time, or was it more of a collaborative back and forth kind of a creative experience?
It depended on the assignment. Certain projects would be very detailed as far as what went into the piece. And a lot of times there was a style guide, which is something that you would refer to in terms of how certain characters would look or environments, colors. Magic the Gathering is very like color based, you know, like in the early days, you didn't have to worry about it so much, but, yeah, so like certain things were very mapped out, and other things would just be like, you know, draw a weird whatever character, and you would just make it up, you know.
And what was your process like? Like, what types of mediums did you use? I guess this was probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. So were you doing any of that digitally, or was it all done in traditional mediums?
Oh, all traditional, yeah. I think today, I don't really keep up with what is happening with Magic, but I believe a lot of it is like digital. But at the time, I could be wrong on that too, by the way. But yeah, at that point, it was all oil paintings that I would do. So you'd have to use like a lot of things like dryers in the paint, and paint very thinly in order to get everything to dry, you know, before the deadline. Because back then, we would actually pack up the paintings and ship them to be shot by the company to prep them for print. So you have situations where your painting would get run over by a truck.
Oh, you've had that before?
I have, yes.
Oh man.
Yeah, that happened with 3 paintings that were all in one box. 2 of them were on watercolor paper. You can actually do oil paintings on watercolor paper. So those 2 were fine. They bent, but the one that was on illustration board cracked right down the middle. And this was like a production piece for like the booster art. So it was like the box that the cards come in the store with like a front facing illustration piece. Yeah, that one got just like cracked in half. So that was pretty heartbreaking. I actually recently, like this collector was a big fan of that particular piece. And I was like, well, I have it, but like it's in 2 pieces. And he's like, well, could you ever like, you know, somehow fix it? And I was like, I mean, it's not going to look perfect, but yeah, I could. And so, I mean, it didn't actually come into 2 pieces. It was just kind of like cracked with like a crack down the middle.
Right.
So the paint had kind of like separated. So I was able to do it. I kind of like sanded it down and like tried to re-protect the paper, because you can't just put oil paint directly on raw paper because it'll, you know, deteriorate over time. So it was quite a process, but I got it done.
That's amazing. So was your experience so we had Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering. You also worked for World of Warcraft at one point, or did projects for them. Mm-hmm. Was your experience working for these different card makers fairly similar between them, or did they each work in kind of a different way?
Pretty similar, actually. The reason I started doing the World of Warcraft stuff was because the art director from Magic moved, and I was kind of like loyal to him at the time. Like I thought he was a cool guy, and he helped me out from here and there. So started working for Warcraft too.
Oh, that's awesome. So did you enjoy that period of your career? Like, is creature design or whatever you want to call it, is that something that you enjoy doing?
Yeah, I love all that stuff. Like, I'm a child of the 80s, like I love monsters. I love movies. I love role-playing stuff. I love comics. I love to draw that kind of thing. As far as like working for that industry, not so much anymore. Like, I truly appreciate being able to do what I did, to actually have a job that I could rely on to pay the bills that was painting, like I love painting too. So I got to do that. But yeah, over time it just kind of like felt like a paycheck, I guess, and just kind of wanted to move into other, because I don't play games at all. Like, I'm not a gamer, like in any regard. Like, I think I tried to play Magic one time and I was like, my head hurts, man. Like this it's a wonderful, very important game, but like it's just not me or whatever. So I think that was another aspect of why I just kind of like moved on. I think in 2007 I was just like, nope, I'm done.
No, I definitely feel that. So sometime in between when you started working for them and when you ended up not working for them, you also started working with Star Wars. And I think that was around 2001.
Right.
That you started doing work for Lucasfilms, creating Star Wars characters or Star Wars artwork. So how did you first start working with Lucas and doing Star Wars stuff?
Okay, so I had a job at a video game company. We were working on like PC games for like Disney and stuff like that, and that all kind of crumbled, and I was kind of like thrown back into the freelance world, not really knowing what to do. And have you ever heard or are you familiar with Tony DiTerlizzi? He's kind of like, he was a role-playing type artist in the beginning too, but he eventually went on to like write his own books and stuff like that. He does the Spiderwick Chronicles, which is very popular amongst young people and things. It's kind of I don't know, it's amazing. I think he has a new series he's working on for Disney Plus right now. Like, he's just killing it.
Nice.
At the time, he showed interest in my work, and like we met at a convention and he bought a piece from me and we spoke a bit. And he had a friend in New York, or actually going back even further, he invited me to do this like Star Wars portfolio, which was just for fun. It wasn't for sale or anything like that. It was just like, you draw your favorite Star Wars piece with all these other artists, and then at the end, everybody gets a copy of the portfolio.
Nice.
And so I did an oil painting of Bib Fortuna with 2 Gamorrean guards. Spent a lot of time on it, probably more than I should, but it ended up working out well because someone at Del Rey Books saw the piece, and then through that, they contacted me, and I had to kind of do a trial run to see if I could be the person to get this job doing like over 100 full color illustrations for a Star Wars encyclopedia type thing.
And that was the new Essential Guide to Characters, right? That was the book you're talking about? Yeah.
Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah, that came out in like 2002, featuring your illustrations alongside a lot of biographical information about the characters. Mm-hmm. So like, what was it like working on that project? I imagine you had to do a lot of research, just because all the obscure characters that like a lot of people may not know about or have a lot of familiarity with.
Yeah, I'm nerdy, but not like extremely nerdy with like the Star Wars stuff. Like, it got pretty in depth. Like, hey, that lightsaber has like 3 little rings on the bottom instead of 2. Like,
oh, wow.
A lot of like picky stuff, but I totally accept that. But yeah, when the project first began, like the FedEx truck showed up and there was like 3 boxes just full of, previous expanded universe Star Wars comics and books and novels that I would have to like flip through until I found the right character, with the right angle where I could see this part of his pants and this part, so like, yeah, my room, I can remember my room back there was just like total disheveled books and stuff everywhere, but somehow I knew where to look through it all.
Were there characters that you had to depict that you didn't have any kind of visual reference for, like just ones that were maybe in a book that they had never created a visual, aesthetic around?
Yes, that was one of the coolest things about the project is certain characters were only maybe like a headshot or just like a text description. And so then I would have to go from there. I think it was only like 2 or 3, but that was kind of like the cherry on top for the project. Was there was a few projects that I kind of got to design a Star Wars character.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Also, I should say, just because I know like this, if there's Star Wars fans on here, they would be kind of psyched. Like, this was right before the prequels came out, the Star Wars prequels. And so I got to see like a few things like before they had even come out. Like Jango Fett, like I needed to draw his blaster gun, and I didn't have like a good shot of it. And so they actually like scanned the gun from the set and like sent me like a picture with like my name all over it, so like if it leaked or something like that, I'd get in trouble. But so it was really cool to have a glimpse of the new upcoming Star Wars movies before they even came out. So I had to say that.
I remember when you brought the book of your drawings for that project to MondoCon one year. I think it was like the second year of MondoCon, which was really cool to see. But I mean, does that also mean that you were doing all of these in traditional mediums as well? Or was it some combination of traditional and digital?
Those were all done in pencil. My initial plan was to ink those pencil drawings too, but like the deadline was just approaching too quickly, and like the way I mapped it out in my head, there was no way I was going to be able to ink them all. So basically they were just pencil drawings, colored in Photoshop.
Okay, very cool. How much like editorial oversight did you get with this one compared to the work that you did with the card game companies? Like, was there a lot of back and forth?
Yeah, it was like kind of like a long approval process. I would send things in batches. That's how that book was done. I think it was like divided up into sections of characters, like the first one would be like the first 30 and then the next 30. I think there were like over 120 in the end. But so I would get changes back with like notes, and then I'd have to resubmit pencil drawings before, and then obviously color approvals too at the very end. Okay. So it was long.
Was it these projects or during this period where you were working with Star Wars that you ended up moving out to California? Is that one of the motivators for you moving to California?
That project allowed me to move to California. I should also say that like when I was working on that, like 9/11 happened. That was like crazy. Wow. Yeah, I was just like sitting there drawing Darth Vader, like watching all this stuff happen on CNN, but like I couldn't stop working, because like everything was like so on a deadline. But so because of 9/11, it was kind of, my move was a little bit delayed, just because I was kind of like unsure what was happening. But then once that whole project wrapped, that kind of allowed me financially to move to San Diego. Okay. But that was just kind of like, I always wanted to live in California back then. It just sounded appealing, and at the time it was all like I could, as long as I had a FedEx box and a computer and internet access, I could kind of live wherever I wanted. So I had some friends in San Diego, so moved there.
How long did you live in San Diego before you went up to Oakland?
I believe like 3 or 4 years. Okay. So not too long. At the time, I started a long distance relationship with my wife now, Tanya, who was from Chicago. And so, she moved to San Diego, to kind of join with me. I don't know how to say it right, but she moved to San Diego and couldn't quite find the right situation with work, and she got a job up in San Francisco, and I was like, we can move up there, sure. So moved up to Oakland.
How did you like living in the Bay Area?
Certain things I loved. There's something to do there every night, in terms of like culture, like music, art, lots of amazing people and things like that going on. But once I had a kid, it became like a little bit stressful, like the area that I lived in. Anyway, there's a lot of like crime and stuff like right outside my door. So yeah, once I had a kid, we kind of like made the plan. We wanted to move somewhere. We didn't quite know where. And then like the vacuum thing kind of happened. And then I suggested to my wife, Minneapolis, for a possibility of move. And I never really thought that she would go for it, but she did. And so we're here now.
So was your move to Minneapolis more of a move away from something or a move to something?
It was both. It was just like the perfect situation, I guess. The Bay Area is incredibly expensive to just survive in. And like, for the most part, I'm just sitting at my desk working anyway, not taking advantage of what's around me. I would try as much as possible, but for the most part, I'm just kind of working. So it didn't really matter where I was. I have the bullets flying by outside, but which literally there were. But yeah, so I met Aaron, I met Aaron Horkey, I met Dan Black, I met Mitch Putnam, I met Brandon Holt, all these guys that I thought were really awesome. And like, it literally felt like in high school, like I could be friends with these guys in that same way, like really tight bond or whatever. So, yeah, it just felt right.
How do you feel about the art community in the Twin Cities versus the art community in the Bay Area? Like, just like, how did you feel about your experiences in each of those two different areas of the country?
I don't want to be insulting or anything, but like, I guess I related to the Bay Area more, like in terms of like, the type of art that was going on there and stuff like that. In the Twin Cities, obviously, like I love all the vacuum stuff and things like that, but it's more like focused differently.
I think that makes sense. So like, I guess several years later, now that you've been in Minnesota for a while, is that where you think you'll stay? Like, do you think that's home now?
I think so. Yeah. I love it here. I've put roots in, I don't really want to tear my daughter out of, the schooling that she has going on, kind of like I was doing and stuff like that. So, yeah, I love it here. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really feel like moving.
Yeah. I mean, you had plenty of that growing up, so
yeah,
I don't blame you. So, while you were doing a lot of commercial stuff early on, kind of dialing back to that period. I guess while you were working on World of Warcraft, Magic the Gathering, and then Star Wars after that, like, I guess, how did you were you able to make time for your own personal artwork? Like, were you doing your own self-directed artwork at the same time, or were you just spending 100% of your time on these commercial projects?
Pretty much 100% on commercial projects. They were pretty constant, those card games and things like that were on a schedule. So I could always kind of count on them to come. I did try to work on my own comic book at one point. It was called Los Mutantes, but, I think I finished like 12 pages and, I just couldn't do it. Maybe someday. There's been talk about maybe releasing it in a certain form through the vacuum, but it was pretty cool. Maybe someday I can finish it, but yeah, at that point it was pretty impossible to find time to do my own stuff.
Do you wish, I mean, I guess, it's hard to say in retrospect, but do you wish that you had carved out more time for you to do your own stuff?
Yeah. I definitely kind of wish I would have caught that bug earlier. Even to this day, I need to, it's always kind of like, once I finish this next thing, then I can jump onto that, which is my plan right now. I kind of did it a little bit, like with the vacuum. I got to do some personal stuff like that, which did pretty well.
Right.
I do miss that quite a bit.
Throughout your career, you've You've worked in several different mediums, in the early, you did some stuff early on with acrylic, you did the oil pieces for several of your card illustrations, and some of the stuff that you did for the vacuum. You've done watercolor and gouache pieces for various like Mondo shows and some of the commercial projects. And then, obviously your ink drawings. Is there a single medium among all of those that you like working on more than the others? Like, is any one of them more like home to you?
Well, yeah, right now I'm like so sick of ink drawings. I don't know if we want to go down this path, but like in 2019, like I had a lot of like health stuff happen to me, and I don't know if I can attribute it to ink drawings, but like my eyesight just totally crapped the bed. So in early January 2019, I had to get glasses, like progressive glasses. And that took a lot of getting used to. And even since then, the eyes deteriorated even more, and I had to get a new prescription.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's just such a fine, when you're using like the Marsmatic Tech pens, you're like just focusing in on these teeny tiny lines for such a long period of time. I'm just like dying to paint right now. And after I wrap up this project that's on my desk, I'm going to be painting again. So I really can't wait for that.
Very cool. That's awesome. So like, how do you typically decide which medium is appropriate for a particular piece? Like, is there some aspect of that work that helps you make that decision, or is it just whatever you feel like for that day,
Certain things are dictated by how it's going to be printed, like if it's a skateboard well, I guess a skateboard you can do however you want these days, but I know how I want a skateboard to look, which is like an old silkscreen type scenario. But if it's like a record cover or something like that can be whatever it is, like I'm usually going to opt to paint it just because I like painting the most.
And how do you typically arrive, at your ideas for a piece? For the stuff that's not like locked down and editorial driven, what is your, brainstorming ideation process look like? I know you've, at least in recent years, have had a pretty healthy sketchbook routine. Is that where your ideas are born usually?
Yeah, I still sketch every morning. I try to get my daughter to do it with me.
Nice.
Yeah, ideas just kind of like bubble up, and then I write them down. Like I have a book where I just kind of like log ideas that come to the surface, usually like on bike rides or walks, or when they come up. I don't know where they're born from, maybe movies or books that I've read or audiobooks, but these ideas just come up and then they kind of like stick in my mind. Other ones I forget, and then I come back and I look at my notes and I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. So like I have no shortage of like things that I want to paint or create. I'm looking forward to trying out some methods of painting that will be more productive in terms of output.
Very cool. So once you have a solid idea for a piece, and once you kind of want to go forward with it, what's your next step as far as like developing that composition out?
The next step, I guess, would probably be, if there's anything I need reference for, I'll gather the reference for. And then I just start drawing, man. I'll do like quick thumbnails first, which is kind of like a teeny little 2-inch drawing where it's just quickly done just to see where the composition is going. And sometimes I'll do color roughs, but not too often. Then I pencil out in what's called a non-photo blue pencil, which is kind of like a traditional comic method. So you can kind of block in where everything is loosely, where you don't have to really worry about erasing or things like that. And then once everything's where it needs to go, I start penciling, and then it's just kind of a long slog after that.
Right on. It's funny you mentioned non-photo blue. I came across an anecdote that you told about a band using the name non-photo blue as a song of, I think it was,
wow.
What was it, Pinback or?
Yeah, Good memory, man. You're like the Nardewar of art. Are you familiar with Nardewar?
That dude's insane. That guy, yeah, he's hilarious. I've been seeing his. I'd only encountered him recently on TikTok, but like the rappers that he talks to like will squirm under how much knowledge he has about them.
Yeah, it's crazy. One of my art pieces actually showed up on a Nardewar interview with Odd Future. He showed them the Goblin Cock album cover.
Nice.
they were very amused by that. It was pretty awesome.
So does your process differ much when it comes to creating work for commercial projects versus just your self-directed work? Like, do you approach, in the early stages as well as in the late stages?
In terms of like process or...
Yeah, I mean, so, developing your composition, whether you said just a minute ago you do thumbnail sketches and then you go to, just that progression of an idea from original concept to final, does it take a different journey if it's for your commercial work versus your personal stuff?
A lot of times it's very identical just in terms of how I put the piece together, but there were a few times like when I was working on some of the personal work for the vacuum where I just kind of like went nuts. Like I just kind of threw paint on the canvas and see what happened, and then like kind of went from there, which was kind of liberating and cool. So I kind of want to like combine the two to agree, like have my idea in stone and then like allow some spontaneity to come in there too. So with the paint and things like that.
So we talked a lot about the commercial work that you did early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. But that's not all you did in kind of the 2000 timeframes. You also got really into vinyl toys, following, I think, an invitation from Puzzhead originally to do a toy-focused event at San Diego Comic-Con one year. So tell me about that. I guess, how did you connect with Puzzhead and start making vinyl figures?
Yeah, the first Puzzhead event was actually in Tokyo at... It was 2003, I believe, the second Skeletal Carnival event. But anyway, the way I met Puzzhead was I wrote him a letter, back like a physical printed letter, and I think I sent him like a couple of those early pieces I mentioned at the beginning of the interview that I just kind of cut out of the magazine and stuck in the letter. And surprisingly, he wrote me back and he sent me some invitations to some kind of fan club type offers that he had going on. And I was like, whoa, that's amazing. And so I bought a few things. And then this guy, Nate Wilson, who was in a band called Devoid of Faith, who ran a record label called Gloom Records, invited Puzzhead to do the cover for the Killers' split 7-inch with a band called Nine Shocks Terror. And so through that project, we kind of somehow, I forget exactly how we started emailing back and forth, but that's kind of the beginning of that friendship.
And so how did that develop into you working in toys?
Okay, so the first toy project that I ever worked on was organized by Puzzhead 2, which was a collaboration with a Japanese toy maker called Rumble Monsters. They do really amazing kind of simplistic kaiju sculpts and toys. He's really great. He's been at it for quite a while. Puzzhead had actually worked with him previously on a figure called the Damdron. And so he showed me what they had available in terms of sculpts and characters. And at the time, he had just released this one called the Bop Dragon. And there had only been like one release, and I thought it was really cool looking. At the time, I don't know how much excitement there was behind it, but I didn't really like understand the scene anyway. I just was going to like do whatever I wanted to, or what made sense to me anyway, with guidance, obviously, from Puzzhead. But I was like, I like that one. And so he put it together. And then several months later, this giant box, well, not giant, but, pretty sizable box shows up at my apartment in Oakland. And it's just filled with these flesh-colored Bop Dragons, which are, like 4.5 inches tall or something like that. And after that, I was just like, what am I going to do with these things? I had no previous knowledge on how to paint vinyl figures. I didn't know what kind of paint to use or anything like that. So one day we made an appointment with Poshead, and he kind of took me into his lair under his wing, and he kind of showed me some of his techniques on how to paint toys. But I have to keep a lot of that kind of quiet.
Yeah.
I don't know how comfortable I feel about talking about certain stuff with Poshead.
Trade secrets.
Yeah, he's a private guy, so I try to respect that.
Yeah, no doubt. Makes sense. So, not long after that, you came out with your own figure, the Mad Battle Man. So where did that come from, and how did you end up launching your own figure?
Yeah, so I had a friend named Justin Kowalski who he used to work at Super 7, and he was like just a toy head. Like, he's super knowledgeable about Japanese toys and American toys, and he's just like a really great person. And he did a documentary video called Toy Punks, which I knew and I enjoyed quite a bit. It kind of interviews some of the, at the time and still today, some of the greatest like Japanese toy makers like Bounty Hunter and Secret Base, others, interviewing people about what toys meant to them in their lives and stuff like that. So they were making Toy Punks 2, and Justin interviewed me for that. Toy Punks 2 never came out, but through that process, I became very good friends with Justin Kowalski, and he had an opportunity to make some toys, and we started talking about it. And I was just like, wow, this is my chance. And so I just jumped at the chance to do it. I didn't really understand how toys were supposed to be sculpted for vinyl or anything. I just kind of like drew what appealed to me, which was kind of like a crouching posed skeleton character. That character originally, he has a mace stuck in his skull. My idea originally was the mace was going to be removed, and it could also fit onto like the club in his hand, so it was like a weapon too. So he had like two poses basically that you could put him in. But due to the restraints of vinyl rotocast toy making, they just couldn't do it or whatever. But maybe someday.
So I guess how involved were you in the actual like sculpting of the master figures? Like with the creation of that, how much were you involved?
I was just like the pain in the ass guy that was like nitpicking everything. Like, I feel bad. Oftentimes with toys, I'm a little bit like, I'm removed from it to the fact where I'm not a sculptor. So I'm just like visually trying to explain what I need to have moved here and there. Sometimes I'll like take the image that they sent me and like Photoshop it, like, no, move this like a little bit over here. And I think I probably go too far with that. So if I ever get the chance to do a toy again, I'll probably be like, you just do it to a degree. And also too, like when you see it on your screen, like the 3D sculpt of the toy, and then side by side compare it to what comes out in the end, like you're like, geez, I was way too they look great, they look very similar, but a lot is lost in the translation into like a actual physical 3D piece of vinyl.
Did you enjoy that experience? Do you think it's something you'd like to do again?
Yeah, for sure. That and like the Devilman toy were like very detailed, expensive projects. I kind of want to do like a very simplistic 4-piece toy that is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. I just need to sit down, and I'm waiting for like the right idea. Like I have some things sketched out, several things, but I'm just kind of waiting because they're kind of expensive to produce, even like the simplistic stuff. So I'm waiting for like that's the idea that I need to go down. A lot of times, like I'll think I'm onto it, and then like I'll see it out there, and I'm like, oh, can't do that. Need to change it.
So you talked, switching gears a little bit. You talked earlier about your move to Minnesota and meeting up with Aaron and Mitch, Dan brand. And so I want to talk a little bit about the vacuum and how you kind of came into that. I talked a little bit about it a couple episodes ago with Mitch and just seeing his perspective of it. But I guess, how did you get involved with the vacuum and ultimately, like, from your perspective, what did that formation look like?
Oh, I have to say, Mitch's interview was really good. Like, he's you're a great interviewer, but he's also like really good at talking.
It was a pleasure. Well, for one, it was a pleasure just catching up with him, but he's great at talking. So it was good to have him on.
Yeah. He said he was very tired at the point of the interview, but I couldn't tell. But, so the vacuum was very just motivating when it all happened, I was a big fan of all those guys. Like, Aaron's probably one of my favorite artists of all time, and to like actually like kind of be on a friendship level with him was pretty amazing too at the same time. So yeah, it was just like this incredible opportunity that I couldn't believe. And so in the beginning stages, like, I just put everything into it. I tried really, really hard to create some stuff just from the bottom of my heart, some of the early stuff that we did is my favorite things I've ever done, like the Embers box set and, the Aftermath print, some of the other prints that I did with the vacuum. So got to do more.
Yeah. That the Embers box set, is that the same work that you were talking about earlier, that you were more expressive and kind of just threw paint on the canvas and let it kind of explore things, ways of working that you hadn't explored before?
Yep. Embers was, some of that stuff came from sketchbook ideas, but it was also kind of the term Embers was kind of like the spark of bigger things. That was the plan, like take those paintings to the next level after, so.
Because it was volume 1, right? I mean, we're waiting for a volume 2.
Well, you're waiting for it, wasn't it? No, that's the plan. I mean, that box set was very elaborate. That was created at Studio on Fire. We had special die cuts made to make a custom box, and then they were silk screened at Burlesque of North America. I put a lot into that. So the fact that it's sitting there available to me to make part 2 is very alluring. I want to do it someday for sure.
Yeah, gotta get on that. So I guess the relationship that I guess you have with the other artists in the group and everything, does that motivate you to have, or motivate you to work harder or more kind of, embrace some of your own ideas more when you're surrounded by such talented people? Oh,
completely. Yeah. Like, the first project, I think, for the vacuum was the volume 1 portfolio, which was one piece from each artist. And I just remember being incredibly motivated to try to do my best work for that, just because of the company that I was going to have it in that portfolio. It was just insane. Like, I just put everything I had into it at the time.
So let's talk about what you have coming up. Like, and what you've been working on lately. What's been your main focus for 2021?
Okay. Well, like I was kind of alluding to, I had some like health stuff happening right around the time of the pandemic kind of came on the scene. I had like a tingling in my throat that was just like getting worse and worse and worse. And it turned out that I had, I'm going to try to pronounce this, laryngophaneal reflux disease, which is kind of it's kind of like GERD, but it's more like a gas from your stomach comes up and kind of like attacks your vocal cords and your throat and things like that. So like, I didn't really understand what was happening at the time, but it was very hard to be creative during that time. That was like May 2019 that it started, and it has been going on up until like October of this year. It finally stopped. So,
so is it something that can go away? Like, is it that sort of a thing?
Yeah. Everything I read about it and everything, I was able to, it was a little bit hard to get in to see an ENT doctor during the whole pandemic and things like that. But I had a lot of like video conferences and stuff like that. But yeah, it can take a very long time. I had to like change my diet. I quit all alcohol. Like at one point I was not drinking any coffee, but I slowly reincorporated that back into the diet. But yeah, I'm very happy to say that it's all totally non-existent at this point as of like October.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, so
that's great.
I'm feeling a lot better, and like every day it keeps getting better, and like I feel like the creative fire is coming back quite a bit. So that's really good.
That's amazing. So during that period, you weren't feeling very creative just because of how you were feeling?
Yeah, a lot of worry, you know. I think a lot of it was probably caused by stress, you know, having a kid during this pandemic, doing homeschooling. We're all in this small house together, and these are her formative years. I'm very worried about, you know, just sitting on a computer all day just was driving me crazy. But eventually got used to it, I suppose, and that's probably why I healed up after a certain point. But I was working the entire time, but it would just be like, you know, work for 3 hours and then it just kind of like would creep up. It got worse during the day. That's kind of like how it works. But yeah, so anyway, people probably don't want to hear about that stuff.
No, I think it's interesting. It's good to for people to know kind of what you got going on. What I guess with that now behind you and you're kind of healing, what does 2022 look like for you?
So I'm been working. I have a couple finished Mondo posters that will come out at some point, and I think I can talk about this because it's been discussed on podcasts and other things like that. But I'm working with a band called Self-Defense Family to do a record cover. Like it's actually with Dan Black too. He's kind of
nice.
Going to be taking care of the packaging and stuff like that, which I'm super, super excited about. So these days vinyl takes quite a long time to come out, but the vinyl's all in production. So I basically need to finish the cover. I finished like the labels and things like that. So got that going on. And then after I wrap up a few other projects, I want to just jump back into painting. I started thinking about doing some other projects for the vacuum too, which I'm not sure I should talk about yet. But
awesome. No, it's great that you have a lot of. I guess your creative spark has returned to you.
Yeah, there's no lack of things that I want to do. I just need to get to them, and also just figure out the best path. You know, there's with so many options, especially these days with like everything feels kind of like fluid, and I'm older now, so I know what to expect going down certain avenues, and some of them just aren't as appealing anymore. Like it's more and more like the vacuum style things become more appealing, just things that I'm in control of. So that's what I want to focus on.
Well, that excites me to hear about, because that's the stuff of yours that I love most of all.
Cool.
So.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess in addition to those releases that you have coming up, for Mondo and Self-Defense Family, any other like events, print releases, anything else you'd want to put on people's radar?
Well, the vacuum A24 thing, whenever that finally happens, that's coming up. But as far as events and stuff like that, with the world kind of being undetermined, I don't really have anything planned. Just put my head down and do as much work as I possibly can.
Awesome. So what's the best place for people to go to find out what you got coming up next?
I guess Instagram. I do need to redo my my website at some point too, where that kind of thing. I want to set up a newsletter and stuff like that. That's on my list of things that I need to tackle, is being more engaged. The Wolfpack on Facebook, I need to yeah, man, me and social media aren't really like gelling right now, but
You're not the only one. I mean,
Really?
it's kind of a nightmare landscape for a lot of people. Just the algorithms and everything is just working against independent creators in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Instagram for me in the beginning was such a great thing. Like it was like very motivating, and maybe it was too easy. I don't know. Maybe that was the problem, but yeah, it kind of feels like it's broken right now. I don't know. I don't really. I like seeing all the art from people when I do see it, but I don't know. I feel like they don't show it to me. I have to like go look for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the change of their algorithm away from timelines it's not only kind of prevented natural stuff or stuff coming up into your timeline naturally, but it's also trained people to use Instagram differently, so that even if they did resurrect the timeline, the I guess chronological timeline, I don't know that people would even use it in the same way that they did before. They've now trained new users of Instagram to think about Instagram in a different way, and it may never return to that, what we experienced and liked before. So that's my fear. And I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but
it's confusing, right? Like, so
yeah.
I just kind of like ignore it and just do art.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, last question. And this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Okay, I knew this question was coming. And there's so many good artists out there that I would like to see, but are you familiar with Phil Hale at all?
Yeah, the name rings a bell, but I can't in my head picture what his art looks like. But the name definitely is familiar to me.
Okay, yeah, he's kind of similar to me, just in the fact that he started out in some role-playing type card games. Like he worked on this game called Dark Age, which was like a trading card game, I believe put together by this artist named Brahm, who I also like quite a bit. But that's where I first saw Phil's work. But he also did like a lot of comic book covers, like for Swamp Thing and Flitch, and he did some Stephen King book covers, which kind of like took him up a level. And then he kind of disappeared, and I don't really understand why for a while. And then he came back as like a incredible fine artist, personal work kind of guy, which is kind of something that I very much admire. He's from the UK, so I don't know. But he kind of seems like he would fit on your platform.
That's awesome. I wonder, I mean, your mention of Stephen King, I'm obviously a big, I talked to Vanessa about our mutual love of Stephen King. So I'm wondering if I encountered, like, if the reason his name rings a bell is because I encountered some of his work in either comics or Stephen King. And because like Desperation and some of those like mid-90s books were very painterly and very artistic. So I wonder if
Dark Tower, I believe, was the.
Okay, he did Dark Tower ones. Yeah, that's a whole series. Like that's an epic series. So that's awesome. That's a great suggestion. And I'll definitely check it out. Mike, thank you so much for doing the show, man. It was really good catching up with you and having a chance to go through your life.
It's over already?
Yeah, we are like almost an hour and a half. So.
Oh my God, is it really? Oh wow, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me, dude. I just wanted to say I appreciate what you're doing for the art scene, as you always kind of seem to do. So yeah, you're rad, and I think what you're doing is cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it, and you're obviously a good friend and someone I've known for a while. So thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, dude.
All right, so we'll cut there. So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Mike. It was really interesting to hear more of Mike's story. I hadn't really talked to him much about the really early work that he'd done, but it's also interesting to know that, looking back to, the early days of his artistic journey, that he wished that he'd focused more on his own personal artwork rather than just constantly chasing deadlines. I know how hard that must be. A regular, consistent paycheck can be an incredibly attractive thing, and understandably. But at the same time, if you're not careful, that constant deadline chasing can also lead you to a place where, you may not be feeling entirely fulfilled. I guess it's all about just, striking a balance, or striking the balance that's right for you. I've talked to a few folks on the show in previous episodes about this very thing. And it's really been interesting to see how different people like Jaw Cooper, Chris Mrozik, Caitlin Hackett, just from a few episodes ago, and some of the other people that I've had on have found the balance that works best for them. Doing commercial work to take that burden of financial responsibility off their personal work, while also making time to still do the personal work that gives them that creative fulfillment. I was really sorry to hear about Mike's medical troubles. I had no idea that he'd been going through that. But I'm excited that he's been on the mend in the last couple of months, and that he's feels recharged creatively. It sounds like it's going to make for a really nice 2022 for him. I'm definitely eager to see where the year takes him and what he has in store for us. So thanks again to Mike for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you could help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. And I just found out that Spotify is actually allowing people to rate podcasts now. So if you're on Spotify, definitely consider giving the show a rating. I really appreciate it. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.
Thank you.